Hey, what up, what up, y'all? Um, I got a little something here. Make sure I got myself right. Give me a second. Hold on. Okay, good. I just want to make sure I got myself right. I have a story here from any Elise. With that being said, let's get into it. And this is talking about people who used to be with foreign chefs and everything of that nature. And again, shout out to Andy Elise for this.
The ones you love most need you. Every second, every day. And while you wouldn't trade being their mom. Imagine growing up in a community where every part of your life, who you marry, where you live, how you raise your children, is dictated by one man. A man who claims to speak directly for God. A man whose word is law, even from inside a prison cell. For members of the FLDS, that has been their reality for decades. Under Warren Jeffs, this group became one of the most extreme and tightly controlled religious organizations in the entire country. Families were separated, young girls were married off, and entire communities operated in complete obedience to a prophet who truly abused his power at every single turn. And even after Warren was sentenced to life in prison, the control did not stop. A splinter group formed under a man named Samuel Bateman, a self-appointed leader who took Warren's teachings even further, collecting wives, transporting children across state lines as federal agents closed in. And when we first covered this case back in 2023, we focused on the behavior, the arrests, the criminal network that Samuel built. But since then, even more information has come out. New plea deals, new confessions, new revelations that Warren continues to send from behind bars. And most disturbing of all, a growing pattern of children from former FLDS families disappearing. Disappearances that many believe are directly connected to Warren's latest prophecies. So today, we are reopening this case. The history, the crimes, the leaders who built this system, and the alarming developments that are still unfolding inside the FLDS community right now. And as a reminder, for these reopened episodes, what we're doing is we're pulling our back catalog where we've already done the deep dive into this case, and then we're adding the updates along the way. So you might hear a different audio here and there due to equipment changing over the years, or it might not feel as seamless, but I just wanted to explain that for these special reopened episodes, that's what we're doing. We're just revisiting these older cases that we've covered and bringing you the news, the updates, and the fresh perspectives. And I've got to say, this case, it is so complex and so wild, and I was like itching to revisit it because there are so many updates. And I've always been fascinated with cults. I have never kept that a secret. The FLDS is one that will not only continue to fascinate me, but haunt me, especially because of all of the new information that we have learned through our firsthand interviews with people from the community. So we have got a lot to go over today. Buckle up, it is going to be a wild one. I'm Annie Elise, this is 10 to Life, and let's jump right in. Nestled in a remote desert region near the border of Arizona and Utah is a peculiar community that is referred to as Short Creek. Two cities, Hilldale, Utah and Colorado City, Arizona, are surrounded by the beautiful red rock canyons of the Colorado Plateau, practically cutting it off from the rest of civilization. And for the people who live there, that seems to be the point in all of it. You can see the women living there wearing pastel, antique-style dresses, prairie style, if you will.
Okay,
Their
what up,
hair
y'all?
in elaborate vintage updos.
What up,
The
y'all?
men are in long sleeve shirts and pants, and everyone seems very overdressed for the type of weather in that area. The
Again, this
children
is talking
trailing
about
behind are like mini
the
versions of the adults. And it looks like you stumbled
FLDS.
onto the set of Little House on the Prairie, or maybe even The Twilight Zone. However, this is
Yeah.
not a Hollywood set. It is the very secretive religious group called the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's basically a religious sect of the fundamentalist Mormon denominations whose members practice polygamy. And just in case you aren't familiar with polygamy, polygamy is the practice of marrying multiple spouses. Usually, in most cases, it's when a man is married to multiple women at once, which you've probably heard of the show Sister Wives. It's the same kind of concept. However, in
Same
rare
premise.
cases, there are some families where the women are married to multiple men as well. And TLC did a show on this called Brother Husbands, I believe it was called, and it's pretty wild. Just
Weird.
look it up. But the FLDS emerged in the
Weird,
early
weird,
20th century
weird.
when its founding members were excommunicated from the Church of Latter-day Saints. Now, the LDS Church is not to be confused with the FLDS Church, two separate things, largely because of their refusal to abandon the practice of plural marriage after it was denounced by the church in 1904. Polygamy is in fact illegal in the United States, and it is not a protected American right. However, it is almost never prosecuted because it is so hard to prove, and officials do not necessarily want to disrupt family units, which personally I don't agree with, because a lot of the time in these family units, quote unquote, there is happening, there is, what's happening, and it just can get really, really dark and ugly. The FLDS are taught that they are the one and only true people of God on earth, and that being part of the FLDS means that you have the highest degree of salvation. They are taught that God's picture of earth is for a man to have multiple wives, and in order to reach the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, you must have at least 3 wives. If you did reach this top tier, then in the afterlife, you would basically become a god yourself. But one thing that was never taught is what women would become, other than just a wife. So you guys know that with these reopened episodes, whenever we can, I love talking with experts who actually work inside these worlds. People who can take us deeper than
Be
the
right back.
headlines and really help us understand what's truly going on. And for this episode, we were lucky enough to speak with Tanya Toole, one of the leading advocates in this country for former members of polygamist and fundamentalist religious groups. She's been featured in countless documentaries, news reports, investigative specials, and she has spent years working directly with former FLDS members and their families. Now, Tanya is the founder of Holding Out Help, an organization that supports people leaving polygamy, which, if you don't know, it is a massive and incredibly dangerous undertaking. And we're going to get into all of that later on in this episode, but first, here's Tanya explaining her organization in her own words.
I think the most important thing is the word Holding Out Help. The word help is all capitals, and it stands for helping, encouraging, and loving polygamists, which was the first words that the family that found us typed into a computer to see if anyone was out here that really cared about their community and could give them services. Our mission is to provide those from a polygamous culture the care, support, and resources to become independent and self-sufficient. There's nearly 60,000 fundamentalists, also known as polygamists, living in the western United States, Canada, and Mexico, with the majority right here and around Utah, but starting to spread out all throughout our nation. We have 3 locations. We have our main hub that provides mental health care services, case management, tutoring. We also do life skills classes and different types of social groups. And then we have 2 independent living facilities, one for women, and then another home for women with children.
You'll hear more from Tanya as we continue throughout this episode, but early on, I really wanted her to break down what life is like inside these groups, what that life actually looks like. Because from the outside, people might think fundamentalist or polygamy, it's just a religious choice or it's a different lifestyle. But from Tanya's perspective, working directly with people coming out of these communities, it is something very different.
What people need to understand is this is a religion for a majority of the people that live within the FLDS community. They're devout, they're sincere, sincere, they're just trying to make their way to heaven. It's when the leaders who essentially in the FLDS, everyone knows is correct, right? It's a very patriarchal society. And so you must do what the men tell you to do within that culture. They also are insular. So they're going to keep all their activities, their church activities, their social groups, their, relationships all within that community and not cross over into mainstream culture. The church will usually own all the assets. Education is a super low priority. Child labor and sexual exploitation is fairly normal. And they really firmly believe that one man on this earth has the ability to either send them to heaven or condemn them to a life without God. They often refer that to the sons and daughters of perdition.
Ready to turn financial complexity into clarity? Meet Planful's Analyst Assistant. Like all of Planful AI's solutions, it's designed to work the way finance professionals think. Mandy can ask it questions in plain language. Analyst Assistant instantly analyzes the financial data, surfaces important information hidden in plain sight, interprets the trends.
There we go.
In daughters of perdition.
So in order to get a good grasp over what kind of religious community or cult this may be, I'll let you decide on that. We're going to go back in time a little bit, and I'm going to give you a very short, condensed history of how the FLDS Church became what it is today, because I believe you need to know where it's been, to where it was going, to where it is now, in order to not only understand it fully, but also to see how completely effed up it is, in my opinion. So Rulon Jeffs was an American polygamist and a religious leader who served as the president of the FLDS from 1986 until his death in 2002. Rulon was born in Salt Lake City, Utah on December 6, 1909. He was not introduced to the teachings of Mormon fundamentalism until September 25, 1938, when his father presented him with a copy of Joseph W. Musser's Truth magazine. Rulon embraced Musser's fundamentalist teachings, immediately almost, and in 1940, he secretly took a plural wife, which resulted in his first wife, Zola Brown, divorcing him, saying, I ain't doing this, I'm outie. Now, court records stated that the Mormon couple had been fighting over something that she dreaded, his desire to marry another wife and join the ranks of the polygamists. Rulon had told her that he had taken a trip to the mountains and had a vision of the woman that God wanted him to marry. It was a girl who worked in a store in Provo, Utah. Now, of course, Zola was not for this by any means, and he responded by telling her that if she did not embrace polygamy and accept this other wife, that things would never be the same between them. And she's like, okay, that's fine. So she ended up filing for divorce due to his persistence in taking on this plural wife. And 2 weeks after the divorce, Rulon was excommunicated from the LDS Church. And this was on April 14th, 1941. When it comes to holiday gifting, I am done buying things that get returned or forgotten. I want to give people gifts that they actually love, timeless pieces, things they'll wear for years. And that's why I'm always going with Quince. From Mongolian cashmere sweaters to Italian wool coats, everything feels premium, but at a price that finally makes sense. I mean, the cashmere, it seriously shocked me. It's soft, structured, it doesn't pill, and honestly, it feels like the quality that I would expect from like a $200 sweater, not $50. Their Italian wool coats are also another standout. They're beautifully tailored, warm, and crafted to last. You can dress them up or throw them on with jeans and still look pulled together. And I was in the fashion industry for a decade, and I feel like I can sniff out the frauds and the good deals. And like Quince, it literally is like the exact same stuff you would get in a department store, but at a fraction of the price. And what I love most is that Quince pieces are made from premium materials that are sourced from ethical, trusted factories, but they're priced far below what other luxury brands charge. The stitching, the fit, the drape, every detail feels elevated and intentional. It's why I can totally see myself giving my friends one of their scarves or their sweaters, or you've heard me talk about it before, their cashmere throw blankets. That is like the best gift you can give to like your in-laws or a friend. It's so soft, it's so easy. I mean, they have a million colors. I have like 5 of them at my house, one on every couch and chair, because they are so cozy. Quince goes way beyond just clothing. They have total gifting covered for the home, bath, kitchen, and travel. I even have their bamboo bed sheets. Seriously, look them up on their website. They are so soft and like cooling and good. Oh my gosh, I love them. And I actually just got their bamboo duvet cover as well. So if you're trying to avoid last minute panic shopping, This makes holiday gifting feel handled. Find gifts that are so good that you're going to want to keep them for yourself with Quince. Go to quince.com/10tolife for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/10tolife to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/10tolife.
Welcome to Beyond Resilience, a new series of conversations
come on.
exploring
There we go.
.com/10tolife. And I just have to say, before we continue, this is something that always fascinates me and really actually kind of angers me when we're talking about religious beliefs and cults and things like that, is when people jump to the fact that they saw a vision. No, I was on top of a mountain and I saw a vision from God of this person that he wants me to marry, who coincidentally usually happens to be some like beautiful young bombshell, sometimes underage, beautiful girl. And it's like, oh, that's who God just picked for you to marry, even though you're already married? Give me a break. It's not a vision, bro. It is your thinking and running your brain. Now look, it has been almost 3 years since I first shared those opinions, and I'm just gonna say, I still feel the exact same way. The whole, I had a vision from God. He told me to marry this very specific, very young woman. I mean, it is so cliche. It is like the roadmap blueprint for all cult leaders. And it still drives me insane. I mean, you guys are all gonna tell me that you have to marry these young girls and that you have to have multiple wives, that God is telling all of you to do that. Give me a break. It is like a predator's playbook. I could go on and on. It just infuriates me, but I will try to, keep my composure, and we're going to move this along. So in the spring of 1945, Rulon, who had been working in northern Idaho since 1943, returned to Salt Lake City, where he was ordained a high priest apostle. And after the death of the former FLDS leader Leroy Johnson, Rulon took leadership of the group. This was in 1986, and he became the self-proclaimed prophet. I hate the word prophet too. It's like a trigger word for me. So the prophet is basically a representation of God on earth. Followers were taught that their prophet knows all of their thoughts, all of their dreams, their wishes, everything. Nothing is private, nothing is secretive. The prophet knows everything. So he's the one who decides who gets married, who marries who, and what man is deserving of adding wives into his family. This was called the placement principle. There was no dating, no courting, and in most cases, these people who were placed in these arranged marriages didn't even know each other. Or worse, they were related to each other. When a father of a young girl felt as if their daughter was old enough to marry, or be married off, I should say, the father would present them to the prophet in hopes that they would be married. Now, one of these girls was Rebecca Musser, who is pretty much a voice for those who have escaped the grasps of the FLDS church. Rebecca was married off to Rulon when she was 19 years old, and he was 85 years old. Gross. In an interview, Rebecca described feeling completely brainwashed during her time in the FLDS, and she shared what daily life looks like for those still inside. Take a listen.
They are taught from birth what to wear, who they are, where they fit in society, how to behave, how to talk, how to think. Every choice for them is do what you're told, or you will be eternally damned. I remember being told that this group, this very small group of people, were the only righteous ones, and God would destroy the entire rest of the world. When Merlin Jeffs died, and Warren, his son, was forcing his father's young wives to be remarried, that was it. I figured if that was heaven, I would take hell. I could not bring myself to go into another situation where I was being forced into sexual violation in the name of God.
The followers of the FLDS under Rulon were told that he would never die, and that he would one day be made young again. So when Rulon's health began to seriously decline, you could imagine what kind of confusion this brought to his followers, his believers, his faithful servants, if you will. Rulon Jeffs led this organization until his death in 2002. He died at the age of 92, and according to documents, it's believed that he had approximately 65 wives and 62 children. I mean, guys, talk about overkill. One of those 62 children was a son named Warren Jeffs, who was born nearly 2 months prematurely in 1955. Now, I'm sure even if you don't know all of the inner workings of the FLDS, you probably are familiar with the name Warren Jeffs. And every time I hear his voice, it sends a shiver down my spine or up my spine. I don't know what the correct phrase is for that, but like the creepiest voice, you'll hear a little bit of it later, but like, I can't. Okay. So, anyways, now his mother Marilyn always pushed Warren to be close with his father Rulon. She thought that he was so special because of his circumstances of surviving being premature. She stated that previous prophets had visited her in a dream and told her that Warren was going to be a very special person. So this made Warren grow up to have this holier-than-thou type complex and personality. And he wasn't liked by many people growing up. He was awkward, weird, and kind of nerdy, if I'm being honest. But he had this proud way of being able to read people, to pick up on what was important to them, and to use that to manipulate and control them. Almost kind of like a brainwashing technique where you know exactly the right things to pull out of somebody to,
Okay, I'm
to
back,
play on
y'all.
their emotions, to play on their inner
I'm
thoughts and what they
I'm here.
desire,
I'm just
to
doing
where they
some
then believe that
things.
you truly are smarter than you actually are. As Warren grew older, his father gave him more responsibility in the church, and as soon as Warren recognized that he had this power, he took full advantage of it and practiced it vigorously. He had this saying, and it was, "Perfect obedience is led by a hair," meaning that a hair is so thin and that perfect obedience could be led by it, and you would not break it, but that if there was any resistance, then it would break the hair. So from there, Warren's influence led to the purging of all things that did not support the FLDS beliefs. Any book that was not approved by Warren himself was banned from the libraries. In science textbooks as well, anything having to do with the solar system or reproduction was removed and actually literally cut out of the books. Warren also created a curriculum specifically for the girls of the FLDS that he would teach in the schools. He taught from a book called Purity in the New and Everlasting Covenant of Marriage, which basically taught to have nothing in your brain except to do the prophet's will, and to even have thoughts of boys in any capacity that could cloud that channel. That you are only supposed to think of the prophet. It's only the prophet. It's always the prophet. Nothing else but the prophet. And so as Warren's father's health was declining, this is when he really began to grow closer to Rulon and started slowly taking over. His teachings became even scarier. He began to teach more about God's wrath and basically told the people of the church that they were going to be destroyed and cleansed off of the face of the earth if they did not live according to the FLDS and to submit to all of the prophet's teachings, because it was directly from God himself. It was all fear-based to get these people to conform to his ways. In 2002, the Olympics were set to be hosted in Salt Lake City. So Warren began to preach about how the world is going to be destroyed during the Olympics and that they needed to get everybody down from Salt Lake City to the Short Creek community as soon as they possibly could. And people listened. People sold their homes and even their
What?
businesses because they believed that the end of the world was coming. Place so that he could essentially control them easier. So everybody waited and waited and waited and waited for something to happen, which of course it never came. A la Y2K, when everybody thought the year 2000 was going to the world was going to like disintegrate or something, and that computers were the devil. I remember that. I was like, hi, now it's like January 2nd, nothing's happened. So nothing came, and Warren had no explanation for this. He told the people that it was just a test and that God had granted them a little more time, and the time was granted so that they could become more righteous, meaning that they
Oh.
needed to be.
And this is how brainwashed people will get, believing in a quote unquote false prophet and things of that nature. This is what happens when people have basically no common sense whatsoever. Let's continue.
More perfect and more obedient. And speaking of these revelations, later in the episode, we're going to get to one of the most unsettling and honestly downright terrifying revelations that Warren has ever issued. And it's one that is still unfolding right now, which I'll just say this. I hope more than anything that this one fails too. Because if it doesn't, it could lead to one of the most devastating outcomes that this community has ever seen. But again, we are going to get to that in just a little bit here. I don't want to get ahead of myself. In 2002, after Rulon died, Warrens fully took over. Very confused by the death, because they were always taught that he would never die, that he was going to become young again. They were taught that he was supposed to be the last prophet, the one to bring them into the millennium. So people were scared. They didn't know what was supposed to happen now. And
one-a-day women's multivitamins are formulated to support women's
come on.
overall health, so you never miss a beat. Some people just don't know that Squarespace isn't just for websites. You can get a domain from Squarespace too. It's kind of like how
they were taught that he was supposed to be the last prophet, the one to bring them into the millennium. So people were scared. They didn't know what was supposed to happen now. And what were his 65 wives now supposed to do? And all of his children. So many people just waited for him to literally sit up and come alive again and be renewed again. In the many weeks after Rulon's funeral, Warren was speaking as though his father was renewed and that his father had just assumed his body now, like reincarnated into Warren's body. And slowly over time and with much manipulation, people began to believe that Warren was the next prophet of God. Warren even helped himself to his late father's many wives. Yes, he married many of his mothers that helped raise him. Just creepy and gross. Ugh.
Weird.
There were many horrible things that Warren Jeffs did during his reign. He manipulated his loyal followers' beliefs and turned it all into money, power, and sex, even preaching that whatever the Lord commands through his prophet is right, even if it seems wrong to our traditions. So things began to change even more. Rules were becoming more stricter, work was becoming much more harsh, no movies or television was ever allowed, and everyone had to sign their property over to the church, and everybody had to turn in all of their guns. But most of the laws and rules were directed only toward the women. Before Warren, women could dress however they pleased, as long as they were covered and not dressed super exposed. But now they weren't allowed to wear any denim, any pants, or anything red. Then he implemented that they all had to wear long undergarments from the wrist to the bottom of their feet, almost like a full catsuit, if you will. And I'm sure you have seen certain examples of this on certain television shows or news networks when there are raids happening of these communities where the women are, in these huge, overly blouson peasant dresses all the way down to their ankle, their long sleeves, they have the braid in their hair, they're covered literally head to toe. Very similar to that. Now, Warren first came onto investigators' radar after discovering that hundreds of teenage young boys were being kicked out of the FLDS community, leaving them homeless. These boys were called the Lost Boys. When you are marrying all of these young girls off to these older men, there, of course, is a surplus of boys that what are you going to do with them? You got to get rid of them. They're not going to marry the young girls because these young girls are getting married to these decrepit old men who are wearing geriatric shoes and stuff like that. What are you going to do with these young studs? Nothing. You got to purge them, right? Because they're stepping on your territory.
Yeah.
They're threatening all
You
your
gotta get rid of
marriages.
them.
Because clearly a young girl is going to prefer a hot young guy versus an 89-year-old man with spots and no hair and wrinkles and who can't even move. But I'm not trying to be ageism here, guys. I'm just keeping it real. So they had to get rid of all these young guys because they were a threat, obviously. This all happened, and you had the Lost Boys who were essentially homeless. And we also wanted to ask Tanya, because honestly, at first, I was just curious whether she works with boys and young men who flee the community too, or if her work is mainly with women and children. But when I asked her, the answer she gave and what she shared about what these boys and young men in this community are going through today, it was far more heartbreaking than I ever expected.
Years and years ago, the term Lost Boys were these boys from the age of 13 to 21 that were literally dumped. A lot of them in the middle of the desert with no money, no identification, no education. Good luck, you were booted out. And they wanted to keep these wives for the older, more powerful men, older men in these communities. And that we definitely have served. We help anybody from this culture, men, women, children, whole families. And we've definitely served some of the Lost Boys from the past. These days, what is happening, instead of kicking them out, they are putting them in what is called repentance homes. So if you've done something wrong, and let me explain what wrong means. You looked up some of the sex, or you got caught listening to secular music, minor things like that, then you would be sent off into a repentance home, which is homes in the middle of rural areas where they're not going to be spotted, and that is where a lot of the abuse occurs. So, for example, years ago, somebody rang my doorbell at 3 a.m. in the morning, and we know what we do is fairly dangerous. It was very odd, and so my husband, who's not scared of anything, gets his rifle out, he's pointing it at the door, and I'm off to the side, and I'm looking out there, I'm like, babe, it's a little boy. And he looked like he was maybe around 10 years old, and there was a man at the bottom of my stairs. And I said, there's a man at the bottom, he's showing me that he's safe, do I open it or do I not? He said, open the door. And it was a boy who actually was older than that, but he was so malnourished that he looked like he was only 10 years old. And he had traveled from a couple other states over, and I don't know how they found my personal home, have no idea, and was dumped off. And he told me his name. I had been communicating with this boy over a burner phone. We dump burner phones when people call and need help, so we know we can talk on a secure line. And I remember thinking, out of his age, I've got to call law enforcement. So he called law enforcement, and they breached the repentance home within probably 18 hours of the report coming in. They transported my boy because of jurisdictional issues back to the state from which he came. And I remember the attorney we worked with and myself, we fled down to the state and knocked on every attorney's door we needed help. They found 9 boys, I think, in this repentance home. And when they breached the door in the kitchen, there was no food. There were no refrigerators. There were no freezers. They went upstairs to the caretaker's room. That's what they call the guy who is over all these kids. And they breached that room that was locked, and they found all the refrigerators and freezers lined up against the back lock with padlocks on them. All those boys got sent back to the FLDS community because they didn't want to pay for the cost it was going to take care of these kids, who were all then sent back into the repentance homes where further abuse happened, hit over the head by 2x4s, 5-gallon buckets of water poured over their heads while they lay on their back, starvation. One kid was sent out into a shed with 30-degree below zero weather with a thin blanket on his back. He had to figure out how to survive for a day and a half out there by himself. The type of trauma and the type of abuse, you do not dare go up against your community because you know these ramifications are so intense. So these were technically lost boys, but they weren't dumped out in our world. Instead, they were being used for slave labor to bring back money for the actual community so they can continue to grow their criminal enterprise. There's repentance homes all over the United States. I mean, we've done rescues primarily in the western United States is where we get these kids. And it's usually one kid brave enough to step foot off of that property and to go ask for help or to actually call law enforcement, and then our agency will get the call and we will work out the details on how we're going to get the kids to safety.
The holidays are here, full of joy, family, friends, and yes, a little hustle and bustle. That's why you need to leave. Between cooking, shopping, and all those extra errands, aches and pains can...
And we will work out the details on how we're going to get the kids to safety.
When Tanya talked about how it's usually one child who is brave enough to step off the property and go get help, I really couldn't help but think about Jordan Turpin from the Turpin family case, which, if you're not familiar with that story, it is devastating, but if you are familiar, you know exactly where I'm going with it, because it's always that one child who finds the courage to do something unthinkably scary, to really risk everything, just to save themselves and their siblings, or their relatives, or their friends. And it's heartbreaking that they have to do that at all, no less that it's a child, because no child should ever be put in that position where they feel like they have to be the one to escape, they have to be the one to go look for help to save the others. I mean, it's just devastating. But anyway, as far as Warren goes, Warren went on to have many, 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 many more women. He had a total of 87 wives, with the youngest one being 12 years old. Mary Ann Jessup is known as the youngest wife of Warren Jeffs. On July 27, 2006, 12-year-old Mary Ann was escorted to the temple by her parents. She hadn't even had her first menstrual cycle yet. There, she was sealed for time and all eternity to Warren Jeffs. During the wedding ceremony, they were expected to consummate the marriage, where Warren truly assaulted Marianne while many of his other wives watched. Warren has approximately 60 children. Rachel Jeffs was known to be the favorite child of Warren, but she was the favorite for all of the wrong reasons. In 2004, Brent Jeffs, Warren's nephew, filed a lawsuit against his uncle for repeatedly assaulting him with objects, if you get what I'm saying, in the 1980s. Brent stated that he kept the situation a secret for so long because of the amount of shame and guilt that he felt. But after so many years of nightmares, he could no longer keep it inside, and he needed to do something about it. When he told his family about that abuse, he was shocked to hear that his brothers said the same thing happened to them as well. In June of 2005, Warren was charged in Arizona with assault on a minor and conspiracy to commit sexual misconduct, again, of a minor. In July, the Arizona Attorney General's office released wanted posters rewarding $10,000 seeking information leading to the arrest of Warren Jeffs. In April of 2006, a warrant for Warren's arrest was issued in Utah for felony charges for accomplice of RAPE of a teenage girl between the ages of 14 and 18 years old. At this point, due to the multiple charges being filed in multiple states, the FBI got involved, and they put this false prophet wannabe on their FBI 10 Most Wanted
as they
list
were
and
supposed
offered a
to.
$60,000 reward, which was soon raised to $100,000. However, Warren continued to arrange his child bride marriages up until his arrest in 2006. On August 26th, he was pulled over in Nevada due to an improperly displayed temporary license plate, where he was arrested and taken into custody on his warrants. Warren was extradited back to Utah, and in January of 2007, he tried to take his own life through hanging, but was found in time and survived. His trial lasted 2 weeks and included testimony from many of his victims and former FLDS members. The defense, of course, argued that this was a case of religious persecution and claimed that Warren was being judged for his belief and practice of polygamy, which, yeah, dude, that's exactly what you're being judged for, because polygamy is illegal and you're marrying children and you're sexual with these children and attacking and assaulting these children. Like, I can't with the religious card always being played to try to get the sympathy or the defense. I hate it. I hate it. So Warren Jeffs was, of course, found guilty, no surprise, and in September of 2007, he was sentenced to 10 years to life in prison. Warren was also scheduled to be tried in Arizona. He had entered a not guilty plea on February 27, 2008, to the sex charges stemming from the arranged marriages of 3 teenage girls to older men. On June 9, 2010, a state judge dismissed all charges with prejudice. The Arizona victims no longer wanted to testify, and Warren had already spent almost 2 years in jail awaiting trial, more time than he would have received had he been convicted. So combined with the pending charges against Warren in Texas, they concluded that it would be impractical and unnecessary to try him in Arizona. But as all of this was happening, the FLDS community hadn't shut down, not by a stretch. The FLDS organization purchased a 1,700-acre ranch in El Dorado, Texas. On the property, they built a temple, a 29,000-square-foot home for Warren, a meeting house, and other homes on this land. An estimated 500 to 700 people moved there from the Short Creek community. This property was named the Yearning for Zion Ranch, also known as the YZR. In March of 2008, a domestic hotline received a call from a female at the YZR who claimed that she was 16 years old and was the victim of sexual and physical assault. The call turned out to be fraudulent, but it triggered a heavy response from law enforcement involving assault weapons, helicopters, and armored vehicles. Due to evidence that was seized in the raid, 6 FLDS members were found guilty on various crime charges against young girls ages 14 through 16. After the raid in 2008, Warren Jeffs was indicted in Texas on a felony sex charge regarding a child, and this charge was for his own sexual conduct with his 12-year-old wife. Utah chose to drop the charges against him so that he could be extradited to Texas to stand trial there, probably because they knew that Texas doesn't really play. That's just my opinion. During the 2011 trial, the jury heard testimony from a psychologist who treated implicated 22 former members of the FLDS church cult, whatever you believe it to be. 2 former FLDS members testified that Warren had RAPE'd them when they were less than 8 years old. The court also heard testimony that he wanted younger and younger wives, and of his over 70 now wives, 24 of them were under the age of 18. And I just want to say, this is all of the documented accounts that we know of. Imagine what this monster has done that is not documented and that nobody has seen. This is only the stuff that is black and white documented. That is scary, scary stuff. On August 9th, 2011, Warren was convicted in Texas of the 2 counts against the child and sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole on July 22nd, 2038. However, Warren still runs this cult from behind prison walls, the best that he can. But from 2006 on, there was no real guidance in Short Creek. There were no new marriages, and in 2010, Warren told them from prison that they should all be practicing abstinence, even the ones who are married, because, you know, if he's not getting any, then neither is anybody else, I suppose. I guess that must be the mentality. No new marriages, no more having sex. Even if you're married, don't have sex, which, let's just be honest, a lot of married people don't have sex as it is. I know I'm going to get canceled for saying that probably, but it's true. Okay, so anyways, so he tells everybody, like, you need to practice abstinence, no more marriages, no more canoodling, nothing. And for the most part, everyone obeyed. They listened to him, even though he was in prison giving these directives. After 2010, Warren began to communicate outside of the prison less, which brought on a sort of emptiness to the people of Short Creek in that community. And now this brings us to Samuel Bateman, the man who was more than eager to fill this void and to step into his place. 46-year-old Samuel Bateman was raised in the FLDS faith in that Short Creek community. He came from an extremely unpopular family in the community, and to be honest, this guy grew up to be the biggest loser of them all. Honestly, just a sorry piece of crap with, like, small man syndrome. Honestly. And you're gonna see why in a second. In 1999, something happened in Samuel's life that would change his personality and really dictate his future path from here on out. A group of young people from Short Creek were heading to another polygamist community in northern Canada known as Bountiful, British Columbia. 4 men in their late teens and early 20s, one of these men being Samuel, were escorting 2 teenage girls to this location. 14-year-old Victoria Cook and 15-year-old Jamie Cook. These girls were both sisters who had been caught acting out and sneaking out of their houses to meet with boys, which, as we know, in the FLDS community is extremely forbidden. The then prophet, Rulon Jeffs, had been meeting with their parents, and it was his decision to send Jamie and her sister to a man named Winston Blackmore. This person was the leader of the community up north. And by the way, this guy had over 150 children and 27 wives, also many of whom were underage. It was Rulon's opinion that spending time with Winston would set the Cook sisters straight and remind them of the proper way to honor God. He also thought that they would make good wives for some of the men up there. So as they were driving through the night through Montana, the driver either fell asleep or hit black ice. Unclear. But all Victoria remembers is being abruptly woken up when the Suburban that they were in rolled. All of the passengers were ejected from the vehicle, and Victoria remembered seeing Samuel lying nearby wailing and moaning in pain.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like, how I'm more than safe.
One was airlifted to a nearby hospital, and out of all of the passengers, Samuel and Victoria were the most injured. Samuel reportedly suffered from a brain injury, and those that knew him reported that this is when a flip just kind of switched in him. He was apparently never the same again, and his personality totally changed. He became even more strict and devout in his religious beliefs. Samuel struggled throughout his life. He made excuses for himself constantly. He never really valued up to anything at all. He was honestly just kind of like a total loser. In 2019, Samuel was financially struggling as well because he apparently was not good at his job as an insurance salesman, and he wasn't making any money. He and a group of other FLDS members traveled to Nebraska to find work. And while in Nebraska, something came up about how no one has had any direct instructions from Warren Jeffs since 2010. It's been 9 years now. So they started questioning things and theorizing off of each other. So they all decided to pray directly to the Heavenly Father, hoping for some answers as to what was to come next and what to do next. Samuel came back and he informed the others that he had received a vision, another vision on a mountaintop. And this vision that he says he had was that Warren Jeffs had not been in touch with them because he had died while he was in prison. Samuel also added that he had gotten instructions from the Heavenly Father that he was supposed to be the new prophet. Which, by the way, Warren Jeffs is most definitely not dead. He is very much alive, and he's actually even denounced Samuel as a prophet. But keep in mind that a lot of these people don't have access to the internet. They don't have the resources to be able to look up this information themselves and validate it. So they pretty much just believed anyone who says that they've had a vision from Heavenly Father, because who are they to question God? The other members were convinced, and they followed Samuel back to the Short Creek community in 2021, where he basically just assumed power. And like I said, no one is going to question God in this community, so they all just took to it. Samuel immediately became obsessed with accumulating money and material things, even though he
Be
didn't
right
have a
back,
job.
y'all.
He also became obsessed with getting wives. He made all of his male followers go out to work and give him a percentage of their earnings, while also giving them some of their wives and even their daughters, this like exchange of sorts. A former follower of this fake prophet, named Morani Johnson, told the Daily Mail how the 46-year-old took advantage of the deep-seated fundamentalist Mormon faith and controlled him with a toxic mix of physical, mental, and even sexual targeted assaults. So devoted to his faith, Morani allowed Samuel to marry several of his wives and most of his daughters. He also funded his lavish lifestyle, which included 2 homes in Colorado City and multiple Bentleys, the car, like money, money, money. He took part in the most humiliating rituals that were demanded by Samuel as well. On one occasion, he was even made to have sex with one of his wives in front of their daughter in order to show them, the daughters, how to please Samuel. Sick, sick, sick. The holidays are basically a booby trap of sugar and carbs. I mean, one minute you're just grabbing a cookie, but then the next you've accidentally eaten half the dessert table, then washed it down with like a peppermint martini, and now you're questioning all your life choices, which I love holiday food. I really do. But it always catches up to me. And that's why I started keeping cassava directly on hand. It stops me from spiraling into like a full-blown holiday food coma, and it actually keeps me feeling human between parties, between travel, and all of the like grazing I inevitably do. I've even started having a cassava shake before holiday events because it kills the cravings before the cookie tray even gets in my direction and line of vision. And I also will pack a couple of servings with me when I'm traveling so that I'm not like living off airport cinnamon rolls or the Golden Arches. But let's talk about their new limited edition flavor, chocolate mint. It tastes like winter in the best possible way. Rich chocolate, cool mint, but it's not loaded with sugar, and it's like getting the fun part of the holidays without
Okay,
the
fast
regret
forward through
part. And if
this.
you're already obsessed with certain as more
Ooh, goodness, I
When I
didn't even go
realized
that
that like
far
you can
back.
just do it,
Ooh, I didn't even go that
I guess I
far.
could just make a game because I saw this other person doing it.
as more information back to the
Christmas is meant to be celebrated in community. Whether this is your first time in church, your first time in a long time, or
for the
Here we
most
go.
part, cut off from all of that. As of October of 2023, Naomi was still behind bars awaiting her next federal court appearance. She had been charged with obstruction of justice and kidnapping, and this was tied to deleting evidence at Samuel's direction and also for helping move underage girls across state lines. Over the following year, she remained part of this larger federal prosecution against Samuel's inner circle. And then, on December 3rd, 2024, Naomi was formally sentenced in federal court in Phoenix. Her conviction centered on obstructing an official proceeding and helping transport minors. So essentially, carrying out Samuel's orders to hide evidence and move his underage wives, if you can even call them that, as the FBI was closing in. And as of mid-2025, Naomi is still in federal custody serving her sentence. The exact term wasn't publicly listed in the reporting that we reviewed, but the charges that she pled to mean that she will remain incarcerated for a very significant period. The lawyer for Danae echoed what Naomi's lawyer said about victimization and added, "She has been catapulted into a world foreign to her, and her incarceration is compounding the trauma that she's already endured in her young life. Danae is experiencing unimaginable agony being separated from her child. This is also the first time she has been separated from her mother, sister, and other close family members." By late 2023, Danae had been indicted for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and tampering with an official proceeding. Then, in August of 2024, she entered a plea agreement in federal court, pleading guilty to obstruction and admitting that she deleted messages for Samuel and helped conceal evidence. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the much more serious kidnapping charges. She also admitted her role in the kidnapping plot itself, helping pick up some of the girls, transporting them out of Arizona, and reconnecting them with Samuel's adult wives while they all tried to hide. At sentencing, the judge took several factors into account, including the 20 months that she had already spent awaiting resolution, her history of trauma herself and coercion within the sect, and the fact that she has a young daughter with a very rare terminal medical condition. So instead of more prison time, she received time served, 6 months of house arrest, 3 years of probation, mandatory life skills, and GED programming, as well as a ban of all contact with Samuel, the victims, or any active polygamist sect. As of now, she remains under court-supervised release, but not incarceration. By late 2023, Moretta had been charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, transporting minors, and tampering. All this tied to helping Samuel hide and move these underage girls. Then, on February 6, 2025, she became one of the latest followers to formally plead guilty. She admitted that she played a direct role in removing the girls from Arizona state custody and then relocating them as part of the sect's plan to keep the children away from investigators. Her plea really did mark another major step in this case, shifting her from an indicted accomplice to a convicted co-conspirator. Her exact sentencing details weren't fully listed in the available reporting, but as of mid-2025, she is officially a convicted participant in the not only kidnapping scheme, but also trafficking scheme. Now, before we get into more of what's happening inside FLDS today, things that we haven't talked about in any of our previous episodes, and honestly, some of the most alarming behavior that we've seen from this group in years, here's a clear look at how the prosecutions around Samuel have unfolded since we last covered this case. In early 2024, several of Samuel's close followers appeared in federal court, and they entered not guilty pleas to an extensive list of charges. Prosecutors laid out just how large Samuel's operation really was. I mean, more than 20 wives, including 10 minors, and a coordinated network designed to hide abuse victims and destroy evidence as the investigators closed in. But as the trial approached, things began to shift. More and more of Samuel's wives started flipping, admitting that they had helped hide his abuse. Those plea deals marked a major turning point in this case. And then came another development. One of Samuel's male followers, Morani Johnson, who we mentioned earlier in this episode, he confessed to transporting 4 underage girls across state lines, and also admitted that he allowed Samuel to take some of his own daughters as, quote, spiritual brides. Not long after that, Samuel himself entered a guilty plea. He admitted to taking underage girls as wives and orchestrating grouped acts involving minors. He also admitted to transporting girls across multiple states and conspiring to kidnap them from state custody. Prosecutors recommended between 20 and 50 years, though one of the charges he pled to carried a potential life sentence, so I don't know why they didn't include life in there, but
Hold on.
but what do I know? I'm not a prosecutor. But something unusual did happen with Samuel's plea. It was tied directly to his followers, meaning that in order for Samuel's deal to go through, all of the charged followers also had to plead guilty. And by the deadline, almost all of them had. The only exception at that point was Naomi. By the end of 2024, Samuel was formally sentenced to 50 years in federal prison, essentially a life sentence. Delivered very powerful and very emotional statements in court, just describing what they endured inside his offshoot sect. That same day, additional reporting confirmed the full scope of what went on and the behavior and how it all worked out. The transporting of the minors across 4 states, the recordings of the sex acts, the so-called atonement ceremonies, and also Samuel's claim that Warren Jeffs had died and he was now the new prophet. I mean, it was the most complete picture that the public had seen of the crimes inside his inner circle. And finally, in May of 2025, one of the most heartbreaking pieces of this entire case finally came to a close. Morani Johnson, the father who gave his 2 daughters to Samuel Bateman, was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 2 of his daughters testified at his sentencing, speaking directly to the years of trauma that he allowed them to go through and the system that he helped uphold. Okay, so now that we have gone through all of that, we really need to talk about what many people consider one of the most disturbing and urgent parts of this entire story. Something that is not past tense and something that absolutely does not seem to be slowing down either. And that is the growing number of children of former FLDS members who are now disappearing. Because despite some of the early claims from law enforcement, there is nothing spontaneous about these disappearances. These are coordinated. These are deliberate events, the kind that have mothers, advocates, and experts sounding the alarm, fearing that this may be part of something much bigger. Something that, from everything that we're hearing, is being directed by Warren Jeffs himself, all from behind bars.
My name is Lorraine Jessup. I haven't seen my kids since February 4th of 2023.
My name is Sarah Johnson. My son Salome has been missing since March of 2021.
My name is Miranda Johnson. I haven't seen or heard from my son since October 29, 2022.
My name is Elizabeth Rowney. I have not seen my daughter Eventra since January 1st, 2023.
Lorraine, Sarah, Miranda, and Elizabeth, the women you all just heard from, are all former FLDS members. Some escaped, some were cast out, but all of them have been cut off from the community since resisting its control. And each one is now living every parent's worst nightmare, searching for a child that the FLDS insists on pulling back in. And for Elizabeth, the situation is especially devastating. You heard her say that she hasn't seen her daughter since January 2023. But in June of 2025, 2 more of her children, Rochelle and Alan, ages 14 and 16, also vanished. An Amber Alert was issued out of Idaho. A multi-state search was launched, then scaled back after investigators received credible information that FLDS members were actively hiding teens and moving them between safe houses. And Elizabeth believes that their older sister, now 18 years old, may have been involved in taking them. But as of today, all 3 children are still missing. Lorraine remembers the exact moment she woke up and realized all 3 of her children were gone, which, listen to her tell us about that heartbreaking moment in this clip.
I checked on them at midnight, and my daughter was awake, and I thought, that's odd. I'll just sleep with one ear open. At 5 in the morning, I awoke to a cold house because the front door was wide open and the kids were gone. It was horrifying. It was cold outside. They didn't take any of their things with them besides what they had on. It's really scary when you don't know where your children are. I immediately called the police and said, my kids have disappeared. Either someone took it upon themselves or were told by church authorities to gather up these children.
Sarah, whose son has been missing since March of 2021, says that he's been in contact with FLDS members who have warned him that his salvation depended on returning. So one day he quietly slipped out of the house, leaving everything behind, and he never came home. She hasn't heard a single confirmed word from him ever since. Miranda believes that her son Denver was heavily influenced by messages coming from inside the FLDS. She says that he was coached on how to disappear, where to go, and exactly who to reach out to. He vanished overnight, and she's convinced that he was pulled
Dreams come truly.
back into the FLDS hiding network. So what is really happening here? Why are these children disappearing or being
why?
taken? Where are they going? According to these mothers and many others with ties to the FLDS community, these disappearances are directly connected to a revelation that Warren issued from prison back in August of 2022. And get this, in that revelation, Warren instructed his followers to, quote, consecrate and return their children to the church by any means necessary. Also, to prepare them for the end of time. He went on to say that the children are needed to help, quote, build Zion so that they can die and become pure and translated beings. Now, I will say, anytime somebody is talking about becoming
Are
a
they
pure
deleting the
person or an
kids?
enlightened being or whatever, the buzzword is going to be for these cult members, it worries me. And it also goes back to the playbook a little bit, having these prophecies of them all coming together, unified together to become better beings and prepare for the end of times. It's giving Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell.
Yeah.
It's also giving David Koresh. It's also giving
Yes.
Jonestown. It's
Yeah,
just, it
it's
never,
giving Jonestown.
ever
So hell
is a
is.
good sign. And it's not just me that thinks that. Former FLDS members insist this is not symbolic. It's a direct, actionable mandate. And it also aligns with years of teachings that followers must, gather the children of apostates so that they can be purified, which an apostate in the FLDS community, by the way, is one of the harshest labels that you can get. It means that you're no longer obeying Warren Jeffs, and the consequence is severe. You're cut off from your family, your support system, and the entire community. Okay, so real talk just for a second here. I thought that I fully had my budget under control, especially going into the holidays. That is until Rocket Money showed me 3 different subscriptions that I was literally paying for twice. And I had absolutely no idea, which that's the thing. Your money can disappear so fast without you even noticing. And Rocket Money, they pull all of your expenses into...
I remember asking this profound question, and I said, all right, you guys, at the end of this 5.5 years, how many of you would have drank the Kool-Aid if you were still in? I'm not kidding you. Every single person raised their hand. And I said, okay, all right, so how many of you would have fed the Kool-Aid to your children? Every single hand in that room raised. And I just weep thinking, we are getting ready for mass suicide if we don't stop this madness. And so it's very, very concerning, and that is why there's so many moms coming out, and the children are going missing, and they have such a fight to get their kids because they're terrified the FLDS are going to kill them at the end of the day.
And if that wasn't disturbing and heartbreaking enough, listen to what Warren Jeff's own brother, Wallace Kenton, said about these revelations.
I want to make this very clear. If the law officials, BI, whoever, doesn't stop Warren, thousands will die. Sorry.
Now remember, the revelation that Warren issued was a 5.5-year prophecy, and it had been released in August of 2022, which means if followers continue treating it as a countdown, we are only about 2 years away, which that is very terrifying to think about. And it's something that I certainly am going to keep watching very closely. As more information comes out, especially about these missing children, I will certainly keep you updated. But before we wrap up today's episode, I asked Tanya what people can actually do to help. Because I know a lot of you who are listening are probably, if you're like me, feeling helpless, angry, scared for all of these kids, or all of the above. So I wanted her to share what meaningful help actually looks like. And here's what she had to say.
I would say definitely stay informed on this topic. Pay attention to your surroundings. Support organizations like us doing the good work. There's another one called Hope After Polygamy that does a lot of our clients' educational scholarships. I would say one of the biggest things is advocate for a better system. Contact Washington, D.C. Contact your state representatives. Say, why are we allowing this in our backyard? I think one of the most important things is you don't have to be part of the rescue. If somebody lands in front of you that is from the culture, just showing up, listening, and being kind to them says more than anything else you could ever do in that person's life. Most people that land on our doorstep is because they came across somebody in society that was kind to them, and they started thinking, wow, what I was taught could possibly be a lie. Maybe outsiders will help me. maybe they will show up. It's collectively the small, steady actions that create the real change and help ensure that no child or adult goes unseen ever again.
This entire group, this cult, whatever you want to call it, that whatever this is, from Warren Jeffs to Samuel Bateman to the missing children to the women and the families fighting every single day to undo the damage that's been done here, it's one of the most complex and deeply unsettling cases that we have ever covered. We have a convicted prophet still issuing revelations from behind bars with loyal followers, people who hang on his every word, still have his photo in their homes, listen to everything he has to say, and believe truly in their heart and soul that he is talking with God. You also have mothers whose kids were taken right out from underneath them. You have survivors trying to rebuild their lives after years of isolation and control, and a community that is still grappling with the fallout of an extremist belief system that refuses to die out. And yet the people who have escaped and the advocates who stand beside them, they are some of the strongest and most resilient individuals out there. People like Tanya, who are doing the work every single day to protect these families, to track these missing kids, and to help piece together a safe path forward. So as new updates continue to come out, especially about these disappearing children, we are going to stay the hearings, the revelations, and
As
the
y'all
families
should.
affected by all of this. Because these kids deserve help, and these
Right.
mothers deserve answers. And these survivors, they deserve a future that is free from fear. So thank you all so much for listening to today's episode. And as always, thank you for being a part of this conversation. The conversation that brings attention to cases that desperately need it. Before you go, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you're listening to this on your podcast app, make sure you are following the podcast so you do not miss future episodes. Thanks so much, guys. And I'm Annie Elise. As always, stay safe. Bye.
Always. With that being said, like, share, subscribe. See y'all
So
later.
you want to start a
Peace.
business. You might think you need a team of people and fancy tech skills, but you don't. You just